Good day, everybody, and welcome to today's latest episode on my YouTube video series. And in today's video, I'm going to show you a snippet from an interview with Ong Ye Kung, the Minister of Health in Singapore, and also the MP for Sembawang in Singapore. Now, this interview was conducted by Keith Yap on the Keith Yap podcast. You can check out in my description below the channel, and the original video link is over there. All credit to Keith Yap for conducting the original video, and I'm taking a snippets from that interview into my video today and adding my comments onto it. I think it's fairly interesting to hear what Minister Ong Ye Kung had to say about Johor Bahru and the Johor Bahru Special Economic Zone, and also as RTS, and also how the interactions between Singaporeans, especially those that live in his GRC district, right, and their interactions with JB. So without further ado, let me play that part of the interview so you guys can hear from Minister Ong directly.
So now I'm Sembawang. We share a border. My constituency, my GRC, shares a border with Johor Bahru. Yeah. We're going to have a RTS next year, end of next year. If everything goes smoothly, it will open 10,000 passengers per hour each way. So there's a lot of exchanges. 100,000, 200,000 exchanges a day. Yeah. Right. I think it changes the landscape totally. As I tell my residents, and sometimes they tell me, but then going to Johor is easier than going to Orchard Road, Yeah. As it is going by the Causeway, they felt that immigration is not that big a hassle, right? I went to Johor twice in December. Once I went by normal channel, and it was very convenient. You pass your passport to the immigration officer. A minute later, they pass you back, which is a similar experience I had when I traveled from Shenzhen. From Hong Kong to Shenzhen. And I think people are feeling that kind of ease and convenience. And with RTS, it's going to be even easier. Yeah. And so you start to feel that actually the economies are so intertwined.
So very interesting comments from Minister Ong, and I think there's a couple of things to point out. Is that number one, of course, for people in the north, right, north of Singapore, going to JB is very easy, right? Especially live in Woodlands, Sembawang, Marsiling, right, or UT, even Choa Chu Kang, going to JB is a lot nearer, possibly a lot nearer than going to a CBD in Singapore, right? And that will get even better, especially when RTS happens, right, which is the end of next year, 2026, right? It'll be a lot easier for people in the north of Singapore to go to JB, because statistically, right, from the surveys we understand only roughly 30% of Singaporeans go to JB at least once a month. Of course, some go way more, but statistically about 30% of Singaporeans go to JB once a month. So there's still about 70% of people in Singapore who don't go to JB very often. And some of you in Singapore, if you see comments, right, believe like JB, wow, very dangerous, nobody go to JB, that kind of thing, or people who go to JB are the siao people, right? But actually, maybe this comes from the 70%, but of course with RTS, a lot more Singaporeans will go, right? And I think that's a very, very big market, or what call that, something that people haven't really looked at in the future, this trend. Number two is, of course, immigration going between JB and Singapore has improved a lot. I think, I know we keep talking about very bad jam or very heavy traffic to go to JB from Singapore. Yes, that still happens. I mean, the trip is not as smooth as you would like, but generally it's also a lot better than what most people think, right? Those days where you have 4 hour, 5 hour crossing, right, is no more, or at least extremely, extremely rare. In most cases, crossing from JB to Singapore shouldn't take more than an hour, right? A worst case on weekends, maybe 2 hours, right? In most cases. So actually crossing to JB is not as bad as you think. Not perfect, right? But not as bad as you think.
Another trip I went, also in December, I wanted to take a look around Bukit Chagar, right? Because the two stations, the Singapore side station is Woodlands North, which is the RTS station on our side in Sembawang GRC. On the other side is near the checkpoint, Bukit Chagar, also near City Square. So when I go over, walking around City Square, I was hanging around the atrium, and I hear people say, Minister Ong, can I take a photo with you? So I turned around, it's my resident. So I took a photo, and then another voice said, Mr. Ong, can I take a photo with you? I turned around, I don't know that person. I say, where do you live? They say, it's Jurong. But they came over to JB. And then soon you have a crowd of people, no? You get that sometimes as a minister attending an event here, but I don't expect that in Johor.
So this part of the interview was actually quite funny because basically Ong Ye Kung was in City Square in JB, right, the big popular mall just outside of immigration, and he found that there's a lot of Singaporeans in the City Square mall, and they come and swarm him to take photos, right, which I think is a funny thing because yeah, we all like to make joke that City Square is a Singaporean mall because a lot of people from Singapore like to go to City Square since it is the nearest mall to Singapore, right? But I'm sure if Mr. Ong were to go to KSL or to go to Mid Valley, South Key, or Aeon Bukit Indah or Aeon Tebrau, he will have a similar experience because many Singaporeans actually today know how to go to all these places in JB, right? Actively exploiting the benefits of JB, right?
I would say three things that will affect us once RTS is open. Number one is investment. And I think future investments will look into not just Singapore, but also leverage on Johor. Yeah, how do I configure my division of labor so that I benefit on the strengths of both sides?
Okay, so in this part of the video, Minister Ong is saying what happens when RTS happens, what's important, right? So he talked about the division of labor between Singapore and Malaysia. And this is basically what the special economic zone between Johor and Singapore is. It's important, you know, that the right type of job is done in Singapore and the right type of job is done in Malaysia. So in short, Malaysia will generally, of course, see a large increased in investments for manufacturing and services will definitely happen a lot more in JB. And I think it's good for Singaporeans to look at what you can do in JB. I think that's an important thought process. Don't think about loss of jobs, but think about what you as a Singaporean can add value in JB. I think it's time to widen our horizon in that perspective because that is what the special economic zone is all about. And I think the Singapore government actively encourages a lot of Singapore businesses and Singaporeans especially to go and get experience overseas, do business overseas, expand overseas. I think that is and the SEZ, the Johor Singapore SEZ is a very part of that story and a very simple one to follow. Actually, the easiest one to follow, if you ask me, in my opinion.
Number two is flow of people. I would expect many Malaysian work permit holders, they may stay in Johor and commute over to work.
Yeah.
And making it a lot easier.
So definitely with the RTS, a lot of Malaysians who work in Singapore can now choose to stay in JB. They don't need to stay in Singapore so much because it's easier to cross. The travel time will be shorter. The other aspect to look at is also more Singapore retirees will also consider to live in JB, right, because of the lower cost of living.
Thirdly is consumption. That is where we need to be quite careful because a lot of consumption is going to go over. Retailers, coffee shops, I think will feel the pressure, which is why I'm also working with MTI to see how can we help this group, especially those in the north. They need to be able to survive. Costs, we need to find a way to help them moderate. How to also rejuvenate their business. You know, how to encourage some of them to open outlets on the other side, benefiting from the market the other side. I think these are some of the practical things we are looking into.
More people will consume or spend in Johor Bahru. So definitely retail businesses in JB will flourish and benefit, especially after the RTS completion. And of course, Singapore also has to differentiate itself. Cannot be the same as JB because otherwise most people will tend to spend in JB because it's cheaper.
I know that my residents are looking forward very much to the opening of RTS and stretching their dollar there. I always tell them, you know, I go over to eat char kway teow. It's 8 ringgit, 12 ringgit, you know. If not of the exchange rate, if the exchange rate is still 1-to-1, which is the case when I grew up, it's actually very expensive plate of char kway teow, you know. We only find it affordable because of the favorable exchange rate in our favor. So Singapore economy must always do well.
And here, Minister Ong shares that actually many of his residents are looking forward to the opening of RTS. So you must understand that it's not a bad thing, right? Especially if you are a consumer, put yourself in the consumer shoes and you live in Woodlands or Sembawang, you get to go over to JB and reduce your cost of living, right? You don't, that's good, right? Everybody loves a deal, everybody loves a discount. And since you have JB next door with the RTS, easy to go over, right? There's a lot of things you can do to stretch your dollar to save money, right? And who doesn't want to save money, right?
It is very odd. I think first time in Singapore we have this kind of situation where I find that I'm so close to another constituency that is in another country. You know, closer than say East Coast or West Coast or Tanjong Pagar even. But I think this is how the people traffic will flow in future.
Yeah, and finally, to end this video, it is important to understand, yes, actually, technically speaking, Sembawang will be closer to JB than it is to many other parts of Singapore, right? So, and it's also to highlight to everybody, to remind everyone that actually the Singapore and Johor Bahru economies are very, very heavily intertwined. So it's important that we have an attitude to make a win-win out of this situation rather than Singaporeans bashing Malaysia or Malaysians bashing Singapore, right? I think that is the wrong approach, right? I think both Malaysians and Singaporeans need to have the approach of how to make the best used case of this scenario, right, of this happening, because you cannot run away. It is happening. The RTS is happening, right? Integration is already there. What I personally believe in very strongly as a Malaysian, as a Singapore PR, how to make the best of both worlds. So I hope this video was interesting to you, right? What Minister Ong Ye Kung had to say. Some of you may not be watching this channel, this video yet. So I hope this opens up some ideas to you and some stories that you can share with your friends. So big shout out to Keith Yap and his podcast for providing and allowing us, giving us permission to share this video, this interview with Mr. Ong on my channel as well. So thank you very much. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you very much and bye bye.